welcome back to the Choosing Known podcast. I'm Laura Catherine Etheridge, and I am glad to be back with each of you. Hope you're doing well today, and looking forward to getting back into our content and our journey. So I want to start with a question that some of us, this is going to evoke a lot of memories, and some of us are going to go, oh, I wasn't even alive yet. And the question is, where were you on September 11th? And all of us can probably quickly remember where we were that day. World Trade Towers coming down, a huge terror attack on the United States, in the United States. And for all of us who were alive when that happened, we can quite vividly remember where we were and what we were doing when we heard that news and just what happened that day. And then for some of us, we were not alive September 11th. So I know a number of you listening probably don't have memory of that. You probably can remember hearing about it, and you can imagine how much of an impact it would make to see airplanes fly into gigantic skyscrapers and those catch on fire and come down. I know you've seen the videos probably and pictures, and just such a crazy day, such a wild experience. And why do I bring that up today? We're going to be spending more time in this slide about character and power and purpose. And last time we were together, we really unpacked the idea of character and how that drives action. And our action is our power. We've talked about that in the episode about the body. It's been quite a few episodes back. I don't remember the number right now, but it's been a few episodes back. And we talked about that idea of the body, and the body is our power. It's our power tool to make all of what we think about and we decide and we believe to go take that and use our body to go make something happen. And so we're going to spend more time on that idea today. And we want to have these layers of understanding that will aid us in our own journey. And then we're going to be taking that in coming episodes together. We're going to take that into the Bible, and we want to know these things because this really unlocks our comprehension when we're reading the Bible, and it will blow our mind what we see in the Bible, the things that Jesus tells us, the various books of the Bible, and what they teach us for everyday life and decisions and things. And so, again, we're looking at the body, we're talking about power, and we want to wrap our head more around that and see it in our life. So why do I bring up September 11th? I was trying to think of a really good story or example for us today when we think about this idea of power in the body. And one that came to my mind was a hero from September 11th, the day of September 11th. His name was Todd Beamer. And Todd was the gentleman that was on United Flight 93, and it was the one that went down in a field. It did not crash into anything, and that was, from what we know now from the recordings in the airplane and also the phone call conversation that Todd had before that flight went down, we know that was much in part because of Todd and him leading other passengers in taking back or working to take back that flight so that it could not be used as a weapon. So he didn't know where it was headed. There wasn't enough information yet for him to know where it was headed, but he did know beyond a shadow of a doubt there were very ill intentions on the part of the hijackers, and they intended indeed to use that flight as a weapon. And so he was aware of that. He knew that something bad was happening. And, I of course, don't know Todd. I bet he was an amazing guy to know. We talked last time about character. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But, wow, I'm really thankful for Todd Beamer. We don't know and probably never will until we get to heaven. We don't know the ripple effect of all of Todd's actions and the lives, Todd and others on that flight, the lives that were saved because they forced that plane down, and of course their lives were all claimed in that plane crash. But we don't know. We don't know who else would have been impacted if they'd not done that. We don't know, people that have been born and are alive today that are here because their parents were not killed, and people that have their friends and they have had meaningful people in their life that have touched them because Todd and others were there to stop something bad from happening. So I just really thankful for Todd. Never knew him, but he is one of our heroes. And I wanted to unpack today, when we think about character and we think about power in action, I wanted to kind of unpack his story. And so I pulled up his story, and here's some of the details that I found. I found this on the Wikipedia page actually about Todd. So he was on the United Flight 93, and that flight was bound, I forget the location it was headed for. I should have looked that up better, but he was headed in a completely different direction, and I was kind of shocked. It was within minutes actually of taking off, right after they had taken off, that the other flights hit the World Trade Tower. It was, like 5 minutes or less. It was really close that their flight was already off the ground. So just, if it had been 5 minutes different, they never would have left the ground. But they left the ground, and they were on that flight. And so as they're on that flight, like we just talked about, Todd becomes aware by these hijackers, taking over the flight, that there's a real problem. And so they don't know whether that flight, we believe now, was intended to go to the White House or whether it was intended to go to the U.S. Capitol building. But Todd and passengers were very aware there was a problem. And I remember last time we were together, we talked about this idea from Jesus in Luke 16, where he says, one who is faithful in very little, and he is going to be faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in very little will also be dishonest in very much. And so we talked about, when you're trustworthy in small things, you will be, because you have character, you're going to be someone who is also trustworthy in very big things. And if you are not trustworthy, you are not faithful, you're not trustworthy in little things, you will be someone who is not trustworthy in big things. And we know that, like we talked about also last time, what's in those invisibles for us is driving the visible. And so, let's hold those ideas, hold those words of Jesus, faithful in little, faithful in much. And let's go back to Todd's story now. And so I saw this in the Wikipedia post that Todd Beamer and his two sisters, just kind of listen to his story, his two sisters, Melissa and Michelle, they were raised with a strong biblical value system and work ethic. So lots of thoughts and beliefs. They were raised in an environment to have a lot of good thoughts and a lot of good beliefs form within them. So they're raised with strong biblical value system and work ethic. Todd attended Wheaton Christian Grammar School, so had a education that was infused with Christian values. He attended Wheaton Academy in his high school years, so he was in, again, another school, infused education with Christian values. And then he started his college education, actually, California State University, and then transferred back home to Illinois to wrap up his college education at Wheaton College. So that's also a Christian liberal arts college. So again, back to more development in education and Christian values. After he graduated and he met his wife, Lisa, they actually attended Princeton Alliance Church and taught Sunday school there and also worked in the youth ministry for about 6 years. So he was plugged into a church. Reading this, it would lead us to believe, that faith had really taken root inside of him and was shaping, helping to shape Todd Beamer's character, who he was, who he had become, and what he was like. And so then on this day, September 11th, he gets on this flight and, of course, has absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And then all of what begins to transpire, the hijackers take over the cockpit. I can't even imagine how just rattling that would be for all of us. And, so he's there, he sees this. Evidently one passenger had already been killed, and Todd's aware this is not good. And so he found one of the phones at that point that was in the plane, one of the phones, and I think it was in the back of a seat, tried to make a phone call, and he ends up on the phone with a lady who worked for GTE Airphone, and she was a supervisor at this company. He didn't know Lisa. Her name was Lisa Jefferson, and he didn't know her from anyone, but he ends up on the phone with her, explaining to her what's happening and what's transpiring on this flight. She begins to share with him that there is something happening. There's been some other flights that have been taken over and some bad things are transpiring. And so before he gets off the phone with her, super intriguing, I didn't know this until reading this Wikipedia post. Before he gets off the phone with her, he actually recited the Lord's Prayer with her. That would lead me to believe that potentially Lisa was also maybe a person of Christian faith. So he recites the Lord's Prayer with her, and he recites Psalm 23. So, to recite something, it has to be stored inside of us, right? We have to have that in our mind. We have to have committed it to memory, which engages the heart and the will, and that's inside of him. And here he's faced with a really hard circumstance, and he has to respond. And out comes character. Out comes all these things that he's committed to his memory and have shaped him and have shaped the character and reputation of who Todd Beamer was. So he quotes these things or recites these things with Lisa, and then he tells her, if I don't make it back, call my family. He had a wife and 3 children, well, 2 children and 1 on the way. His wife, Lisa, was expecting their daughter. They had 2 sons, and they were expecting their third, which was a little girl. And so he tells Lisa Jefferson, the airphone supervisor, if I don't make it back, would you call my family and let them know how much I love them? And then we hear that evidently Lisa Jefferson was still on the phone, and she heard muffled voices and Todd clearly answering, "Are you ready?" And then he says the words that many of us probably would know, and he says, "Okay, let's roll." And those were the last words. Those were the last words that we hear from Todd, and he led. We understand from the Wikipedia post, he led passengers in going towards that cockpit. Evidently, 2 of the hijackers had knives. That's scary. I mean, that's just scary. There's 2 people clearly bent on evil. They have knives. There was another one that evidently had a bomb strapped to them, and they're just caught in this awful circumstance. And yet, in that awful circumstance, I'm using something that probably almost none of us will face, something that bad. But in this awful circumstance, we see outcoming from Todd Beamer character. We see courage. We see a hero. And we will never know, probably until maybe eternity. When we get to look back over history, we're never going to know what was the impact of that. And I so would love for Todd to still be with us today, and for his family to have him. He was a loved husband, he was a father, and he was somebody's son and family member. And so what a loss for them. And yet for us in America, what a gift that Todd Beamer was on that flight, and his character came out, and he decided in that moment, not really in that moment, he had the character inside of him that was aiding him in that moment to make the decision of, no matter what happens to me, no matter what happens to those of us on this flight, we have to do everything we can to stop what's about to happen, because it's going to hurt more people, it's going to impact more people. So he really was actually, Todd was a hero before he got on that plane. And why? Why do I say that? Because what was inside of him, he was actually poised to be a hero. He had built into his character what was needed should the moment arise, and for Todd it did, that would require hero-like action, hero-like power. He had that inside of him, and it was there, and he really was just a hero in waiting. And then in the moment, out comes all of that accumulated character from many years, his upbringing and his faith upbringing and his Christian education and his time spent in church and the teaching of Sunday school and the attendance of that church and working in youth ministry. And here it comes, and he steps up and he makes this difficult decision to protect others at the risk of his own life. And we know that he gave his life. And so let me take us back now, very big story there. But let me take us back to this idea now of the human components and character and power. And we've talked about our actions come out of what we believe. We've spent time on that in earlier episodes. And then last time we talked about character, and that's where our actions are also coming out of. And, Todd is a really good story in the sense of he is an incredible example of what we all hopefully are becoming. Our character is becoming such that, heaven forbid, we hope it doesn't happen, but should we bump into something really challenging and difficult, that is by no means the time to try to forge character. And the truth is, it will not work. I remember years ago my parents saying that to me, like, if you don't know what your boundaries are, if you don't know what you really think about something, the time to decide that is not in the moment. And that was great advice. I mean, it's so true. We can't create years and years and years of layered character in a moment. We can't do that. Now, we can resist something, but the time to build character that's going to shape our actions for super significant moments, good or not good, that is over the course of life. And once that moment comes, that's when what's in there is going to be triggered. And that's, we talked about habitual and patterns and all of that coming out of us. That's when it's going to show up. It's just going to come out as our habit, our default response. And there it is. And so we see here this idea of character, and then there's the power and the actions that come out of us. So let's take this now into our life, and be responsive to this idea. So, as we consider our actions, as we look at our power, and we look at what we do, and we maybe want to consider, if I come into something that's challenging, or if I come into something that's incredibly wonderful, an amazing opportunity, a promotion, or a chance to really help or bless someone, we want to have built that character. And so, let's be reminded too of the words of Jesus. And I'm going back to these words that we've talked about a few episodes ago, Matthew 12:35. And Jesus says to us this idea of a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart. And an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. And, we see that in the story of the hijackers, and we see this in the story of Todd Beamer. I mean, talk about good facing evil, and the standoff, that's there. And where was the behavior for both of those groups. So Todd leading passengers, and then these gentlemen who were the hijackers. They are working together for evil. And where was that coming from? It was coming from all of that invisible. So we've looked at this slide together too. I mean, all that invisible was now driving the visible, and it was driving the behavior and how they showed up. A little side note too on this story. I actually went a number of years ago. I think it might have been 2019. It was before COVID, and I went with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, to New York City for a weekend, and we had a blast. She knows New York City well, and we had a really good time just hanging out in the city for the weekend. But one of the things we went and did was we actually went to the 9/11 museum, the memorial that's there. And I think one of the things that struck me probably the most was seeing video footage of the gentlemen who were the hijackers coming through security at the airport before they committed these horrible things against the American people. And I just remember seeing them and thinking as I watched them with their visible behavior, you would never know that what they were about to do was going to happen if you just watched them. I mean, it was, and I travel a fair amount of time in airports, and I go through security a lot, and it just really struck me. I mean, here these guys are coming through security, doing all the stuff that you do. And of course, back then it was a little bit different because now we have a lot more security when we go through the airport because of 9/11. But, they were just coming through. You never would have known. You never would have known that they were going to do that. However, all of that was already in there. The mind and the character and their beliefs, all of that was already in there, and it was leading them to go do what they thought was a great thing to do, which is just hard for us to imagine. But that was their character. And so, Jesus is talking about that. He's telling us, you're going to produce good things if you have a good heart. You have a treasury of a good heart. And if you don't, you will produce evil things, and they're going to come from that heart. They're going to come from that kind of a place. And, we could think of that as this idea of we are, like Todd Beamer, we can either be a hero, waiting to happen. It's just requiring the right moment, the right setting, and here comes out this hero character. Or we could already be someone who is, maybe we don't use hijacker, that's a pretty extreme. Maybe we're kind of already a thief. We haven't committed the act of stealing, but it's already in there. I already am wanting, and the Bible tells us the word coveting. I'm wanting and coveting something, and I've made the decision internally. This is the belief part. I've thought about it. Ooh, I want that, and then there's the heart. We come up to the top part of that triangle, and there's the heart, and I want it, and I deserve it, and I should have it. And we've already made that decision. We are already, Jesus talks about this in the Sermon on the Mount. He talks about this idea of, if your heart's already done it, you're already there, because you're just waiting for the moment to actually act out. There's power. You're just waiting for that moment to go take action on that thing that you've already decided on. So we are all, either in this place of having character that's built, that we're maybe a hero in waiting, or maybe we aren't. Maybe we're some form of, there's the evil heart. We're someone bent on something that's not good, and we're just in waiting in that particular realm of who we are. So just trying to help, again, connect us to, putting the slide back up here, connect us to this idea of power. And we want to see that because we want to see it in our life. We want to break down these concepts and layer them so that we have more comprehension, and then we also want to have this understanding, because we're going to dive into, in coming episodes, we're going to go into the Bible. And when we know this, oh my word, the things that stand out to us and the things that we take away, because Jesus is talking to people, and the Bible was meant to be taken into the human container, and it was meant to be absorbed inside of a human and processed. And so we need this comprehension of these kinds of slides and this information to help us then have that when we go into and we're reading scripture. And maybe that's already happening some for you. As you've learned these things, if you have a habit of reading the Bible, you're probably already noticing some new things that are jumping out to you just from what we've talked about so far. So, application and this week, what do we want to practice? Like I say every week, we want to notice, we want to dissect. So we want to remember that our behavior is coming out of our character, our power, our action, our enacting of things, that's coming out of the character of who we are. And so we may want to unpack or dissect maybe something really good. So if we do something and we're pleased with it or we're proud of it, we might want to just kind of go against the grain of that arrow and kind of go back and go, hey, what had I thought about and what had I come to believe that helped that wonderful action, that high quality action come out of me? And we may want to also look at something that maybe we don't like so much and we don't feel good about, and we may want to go back into the heart and the mind and look at our character and say, what's been built into me in what I've absorbed and what I've come to believe? What's been built into me that was already in there that prompted this particular action, this power, this behavior coming out of me? What was in there? So notice those things this week. And you may want to notice, if you're reading your Bible, you may want to dissect maybe even a story from the Bible. Maybe you're with somebody this week and maybe they do something really good. If it's good, you could maybe even ask them, hey, just curious, I really liked that thing that you did. What do you think it is that you've developed inside of who you are that helps you do things like that? And, people love to talk about that kind of thing. I found that they all of us appreciate being noticed for great things that we do. If somebody does something that's not so good, probably not the best time to ask them about it. They usually don't like so much us unpacking that with them. But that may be something we want to think about. Wow, the way that person behaved in traffic, the way that person, just showed up with me. What's maybe gone on for them that would prompt that kind of a behavior coming out of them. And I won't go into this far, but that's where we get to practice that idea of just forgiveness and letting it go, because some of who they are just spilled out on us, and we don't need to let it stay with us. We just forgive and we let it go. But sometimes it can be worth kind of pondering for a few minutes. What maybe is inside of somebody that would prompt that to come out. So. Hope you have a wonderful week. Good talking to all of you, and look forward to picking back up with you next time, and enjoy continuing to ponder these things about character and power. And next time we'll get into the idea of purpose together. So have a wonderful week. Talk to you then.